Hello and welcome to one of the most iconic decks of all time. But before we get into the video, if you do like these, please do like, comment and subscribe. It really helps out the channel and I really appreciate your support. Now, White Weenie is a small aggressive creature deck, and White has some of the best ones in the format. Savannah Lions and Acacian Javelineers are both amazing, and basically every White Weenie deck will play 4 of each of those. They're just too good not to play. We also have many incredible options for 2 mana. Lots of these creatures have protection from a certain color. White Knight and Order of Lightbearer being the most common because they also have 2 power and first strike and are just generally very good. But there are really a lot of playable creatures in White, so there's really actually too many for me to mention all of them in this video, but there's a lot of different kind of corner case creatures, and it really does come down to personal preference and what you are trying to build. Other creatures that you might want to include would be Preacher, which is just very strong against other creature decks, and of course Serra Angel being a classic white creature that's just very, very strong. So White Weenie is well known as playing lots of smaller creatures and then buffing them up with pump effects. Crusade is definitely the most played of all of these, but do remember it does also pump our opponent's white creatures too. Army of Allah is the next most played. It gives all of our creatures a one-time boost to their power, so we can get in for some extra damage. Jihad, if you do see that, it's usually just a one-off, as we can't play it when our opponent has no cards in play, or for example against artifact decks that just only have artifact creatures. And I should add a disclaimer that there is some controversy surrounding both Jihad and Crusade. I won't get into that in this video, but I will say in practical terms of actually playing old school, the overwhelming majority of events are completely fine with people playing these cards. In terms of removal, of course, we have some of the best ones in the game in Swords to Plowshares and Disenchant, and Chaos Orb is just a classic old school card, so we'll definitely be playing that. Also, some of these decks do play Aeliopile, hopefully I've pronounced that right, just as an extra colorless way to get some damage in and a way to kill creatures, as we may want a little bit extra. So I usually play the X point format, which limits deck construction to only 10 points worth of the cards from this list. It's a super awesome and fun format. Once you've reached 10 points worth of these cards, you cannot play anymore. So obviously if you're not playing X points, you'll just play whichever good cards you want. But I do, so I've put my points into these cards. Now Armageddon is absolutely incredible in an aggressive deck like this, so we definitely want multiple copies of that. Mishra's Factory, also good in every deck really, but especially in an aggressive deck like this, where we don't really have too many mana requirements. And the Mox is very expensive, so don't worry if you don't have one, it's not essential, you could definitely play something else. And I put my last point in Maze of Ith because sometimes it's good when we want to just swing in with everything and then we can just save one of our attacking creatures. As far as lands go, of course, we're a mono white deck, so we're playing lots of plains, and Strip Mine, which goes in pretty much every deck. But a lot of these White Weenie lists will want to play 1 or 2 Pendelhavens, as it can pump some of our smaller creatures. So as far as options go, this deck just has so many. For example, you could play a flying build where you're just playing lots and lots of flying creatures. There's also a very popular Sleight of Mind build where you use lots of protection creatures and then Sleight of Mind to change the color to whatever you're playing against or as a kind of combat trick. This build is quite popular and quite good. There's also banding builds where you have lots of creatures with banding and then Maze of Ith, which is a super annoying combination. And there's also lots of first strike builds because there's just so many creatures that have first strike. So you could play many first strikers and then lots of pump effects. However, another very common build is one splashing red for burn spells and potentially Wheel of Fortune. This deck can really combine the good creatures of white and the good removal of red to just be a super powerful deck. And so for sideboarding, we also have a lot of good options. You'll definitely want something for against both red and black, and artifacts and enchantments, so Dust to Dusk is a very good card against those artifact decks. I personally like playing more copies of Preacher for against those creature matchups, and copies of Winter Orb, which are amazing against those slower, more grindy control or mid-range decks. So when playing it, sometimes you want to just run out all your stuff as quickly as possible until you get to 4 mana and then hit an Armageddon, destroying all lands and just winning the game while your opponent can't do anything. In other situations, you'll want to just play out limited resources because your opponent has sweepers or mass removal of some kind. Then, the resources that you play out will die, and you can just unload the ones you have in your hand to just take over the game afterwards. Against the deck, this deck really doesn't like efficient big blockers such as a ramped out Spitting Slug, Djinn, something like that. Sweepers are also very, very good, as well as some specific anti-creature cards such as Control Magic. And we are definitely an aggro deck. We're trying to beat down in pretty much every single situation. Although against some other aggro decks and bigger creature decks, we can stall them with all of our first striking creatures. But generally, we're just looking to beat down. The strengths of the deck: it has very good creatures and a huge number of options, very strong anti-control cards and good mana, but the downsides are sweepers, some very big creatures, and some anti-control cards that can make our life a bit difficult. So here's an example list, and here is another version in picture form. If you do like this video, then please do like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.